Let's go back in time to 2016. Overwatch 1 releases and practically reinvents the way hero shooters and multiplayer shooters, especially from a first person perspective, are played and handled. With its appealing visual style, cartoony graphics, and narrative driven gameplay events, it became a fresh experience for many players and introduced people to the genre that may not have been around during the days of Quake or even Halo Combat Evolved, with a lot of similar, more condensed map design and layouts before it made its unnecessary and immediately hated sequel Overwatch 2, which didn't add really anything new or tangible or potent to the formula. And compared to something like Paladins, it was in the first place lacking a lot of the variety and diversity of the maps. In Overwatch, you'll find yourself mostly fighting in city streets and more confined areas, which is fine. Look at games like Counter-Strikes or now the discontinued Gotham City Imposters. That's what a lot of those games are about. But Paladins really took that formula and scale and improved on it 1000-fold. It had similar environments and styles to something like Immortal Phoenix Rising, Zelda Breath of the Wild, and it was really fun and refreshing to have more variety in the environments than being in those really type of gray and samey locations over and over again. Everyone has their own tastes, so it's fine if people only enjoy fighting in the city streets, or if they don't have time to spend a lot of time playing games and they just wouldn't be able to get to those rounds where those more fantastical and sci-fi inspired maps would pop up. But it's just great to have variety as a whole because it creates a fresh experience in a brand new game and in the same game years later. Now, we all also know about Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which was another product of chasing trends and publisher interference. And again, it's not Rocksteady's fault entirely. That game has been developed for over 9 years. They started on it immediately after Arkham Knight released, and at that time, again, Arkham Knight released in 2015, and in 2016 is when this new live service trend and type of stylized hero shooter gameplay started to rise, develop, and peak. And Suicide Squad spent too much development time and money to alter the formula, and after it was initially revealed, especially the gameplay trailer, people knew it was going to be dead on arrival, unfortunately. Now, this isn't a review for Suicide Squad or Overwatch, but I wanted to make these points just to get people caught up and see where I'm going with this. Because Marvel Rivals is, like I mentioned, a very refreshing and fun experience like those games were when they released. You have so many unique locations inspired by the Marvel Universe that we don't get in a lot of other games, especially stuff like Marvel's Avengers or even Marvel's Spider-Man games as of yet. And the gameplay is structured a lot like Ultimate Alliance, so in a way, I had this realization while I was playing it the other day that this is kind of like Ultimate Alliance 4, because the original 3 Ultimate Alliance games followed that structure of being technically hero shooters, quote unquote, but just team-based gameplay overall. And the original 2 Marvel Ultimate Alliance games had that top-down view, and then the third one kind of let you push in to more of a third-person perspective. And now Marvel Rivals just lets you play from a third-person perspective overall. The way the character selection and menus are structured in Marvel Rivals is also very similar to Ultimate Alliance, especially Ultimate Alliance 3, because Ultimate Alliance 3 was another game that adopted that very comic booky, vibrant style, which works for that more than really any other game in this type of genre, because it's literally based off of comic books and those characters. But it was just very interesting to see that same style and that same menu and character selection structure being adopted into Marvel Rivals, especially because every character in Rivals is immediately available. There are no locked characters yet. Hopefully that doesn't change, but it's really nice to be able to just hop into any match or practice mode or target practice and just play as any of the characters. And that's really one of the main reasons, before we get into the gameplay and everything, that I can see Rivals flourishing and thriving and being remembered as another one of the most consumer-friendly games like Fortnite, where the content is available to you immediately. They don't lock anything behind a paywall. There is no pay-to-win mechanic. What you see is what you get, and no matter how many crystals or in-game credits that you purchase, none of it's going to give you an unfair advantage over anyone else. And on top of that, the level systems and progression are so far automatic, so you don't have to worry about that at all. Everyone upgrades and levels up based on their skill set, their rank, their playtime, and how they contribute. The game even kind of adapts to your play style, and when you join things like the tournament or the groups or other factions, you can assign yourself to be a specific class, which would be whatever you're most comfortable playing in the quick match and the practice modes. So that just really makes it all convenient to get immersed and feel like you are the character, and you really don't have to worry about anything else. There's no sweaty grind, there's no stress over any of it, you're not missing out on anything, and even being competitive is really laid back. I haven't felt this relaxed while playing any multiplayer game in a long time, and another factor to that is the way the game moves. Now, this is also kind of a downside, but although Rivals does have plenty of fast-paced, intense moments when you are defending an objective, Marvel Rivals has plenty of intense close quarters combat. You'll find yourself frantically turning around, looking over your shoulder, standing in one place to listen to footsteps. And that brings me into discussing the speed of the game, which of course has its pros and cons like any other title, but thankfully in this case the pros outweigh the cons, although one minor nitpick that kind of plays a major factor in the momentum and movement of the game is how slow some of the characters move. For example, in this video you're seeing a lot of Magneto gameplay. Magneto has become my main character. In any multiplayer game, I usually play a support character because it's just more laid back and I don't always have so much time to play, so I want to be able to feel like I've accomplished something in each match by getting kills, capturing objectives, and most of all supporting your teammates. But Magneto, as you can see, is very, very slow. You cannot speed up without getting these little bubble orbs that replenish your health, give you a bit of shield protection, and also give you a boost forward. There are also players who can send a healing aura to you and also help increase your speed, but all of that doesn't happen too often. You kind of have to look for it or wait for a player to help you, and that can make getting to an objective really tedious, especially because when you respawn, most of the time you go straight back to the initial spawn point on your side and in your base. Sometimes characters like Doctor Strange can revive you in half a second or 1 second, and that becomes really convenient. But you also have to be paying attention because you don't really get an indicator about it. You just kind of respawn, and if you're in a really intense situation, you might get killed again and you'll be sent back to the beginning. But given the game is really fun, really consumer friendly, really intuitive, and creative in its own right, those little negatives can be forgiven until they are patched. If they are patched, that is. So aside from Magneto, you also have other characters, of course. You have Spider-Man, Captain America, Hulk, Moon Knight, and so many others. In this video, I don't go through all of them, but here are some of the icons that portray the characters. And what I really love about the icons here is it's just showing more of this game's unique identity. When you hover over them, the characters kind of pop out in a three-dimensional way, and they follow the movement of your mouse cursor. From my knowledge, we haven't really seen this type of little detail in too many games or any games before, aside from having the eyes of a character or head of a character follow the mouse. It just really complements the style of this game, which is, of course, going for a comic book illustration look. And it really separates itself from other stylized games with cartoon shaders and just that general vibrant art direction that we see in a lot of these types of titles. All of the characters are really painted, which again I love mostly because of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Ever since I started watching that show as a kid, I immediately fell in love with that style, and that also contributed to myself loving so many more heavily painted styles in comic books and graphic novels, and I think that they really did a great job of translating that here. Just like Ultimate Alliance, even though there are a plethora of characters to choose from, they all have their respective and unique playstyles. The game gives you a lot of options for attacks and abilities. You have your standard light power attacks, and then you have your team-up abilities, which you get to select before the match even starts. You can send a request to another player to team up together when you're in range and when you both have your abilities charged up, and do the same thing that Ultimate Alliance does, which allows for two characters to combine their power sets and abilities and create a massive attack dealing heavy damage to whichever characters are in the area. In Magneto's case, you have more of a support set, like I briefly mentioned before, where he has a standard light attack that just fires little balls of magnetism. Then you have one where he fires a shard that's kind of like a mix of metal and magnetism, and he kind of forms this dagger or crystal-looking object that can penetrate enemies. You can jump, which is going to be your main form of movement if you are playing with slower characters like him. And when you are falling from any sort of height, if you hold the jump button, whichever button it is on your console or PC, you will do a little hover down and you'll have this little purple magnetism effect. It doesn't really benefit you unless you're thrown out of the map, but it's just a cool thing to have. It kind of slows you down a bit more, but it also just gives you more control. For instance, there is a small character, which is a shark, and it can literally eat you up and then swim through the ground and toss you off of the ledge out of bounds in whichever map you're in. This is especially where the hovering ability comes into play. It doesn't always trigger right away. You kind of have to play around with it, but it's usually the most responsive when you are in the air or falling from a greater height. I've had this ability save me a lot from being thrown off the ledge, and you have to time it really well because you can't grab onto ledges. It's not going to be like a platformer or a parkour game or any action adventure game. If you even just miss the ledge when you're hovering back, you are gonna die and respawn. For this and for speed, I recommend playing as Spider-Man, Moon Knight, Captain America, Iron Man, just lighter characters in general who have more speed. And all of them, of course, have their own advantages and disadvantages with abilities. Magneto, for example, has this ability when you charge up and you see the little yellow flashing icon at the bottom, similar to how Starkiller's power ability charges up over time during combat in The Force Unleashed 2. When you use that ability, you will have a brief window of time to use Magneto's giant kinetic magnetic ball and crush any enemies in the area. It's not extremely powerful, so you have to time it just right, because even if you hit the area around a character, it won't do too much damage. But if you can get it spot on, especially in a group of enemies, you can deal a fairly significant amount of damage, depending on the level of health that the other players are on and how close you are. If you are farther, you may just take a little sliver of health. If you are closer, you can get half or more of their health down. I often save this ability for when the enemy team is about to overwhelm us while we are trying to capture the objective. A lot of this game, well, all of this game is going to be capturing specific area objectives. Not like command posts, but also very similar to that. They're just capture points. They're indicated as red when the enemy is in control of them, and as blue when your team is in control of them. And at the top of the screen, you'll see 2 progress bars, and you'll hear a sound when each progress bar progresses and when the other team or your team is very close to being in control of each area. When you first start the game, enemy and friendly players are not going to be immediately obvious to everyone, because the highlights of the characters are not as clear as in other multiplayer games, but once you see them, you'll know who the enemies are. Your team has this really light, soft blue hue, and they also have their blue gamer tags above them and the character name. And the enemy team has this really light orange hue, so you have to keep track of that, especially during intense gameplay, and it can just be a bit frustrating and tedious to locate the enemy player, especially in those confined skirmishes, but you'll get used to it fairly quickly. And again, you should really take the time to stand around. Sometimes just find a corner or a wall and just listen to footsteps. I use that strategy in a lot of other multiplayer games, especially like Battlefront. And it really helps because just like in those games, the sound design here is quite strong. You have unique sounds for each ability. You know when the sound for the progress bar is playing, and when an enemy is close to you, whether they're coming from the side or from behind or in front of you, the footsteps will be kind of obnoxiously loud, like someone is knocking on your door multiple times, but that knocking sound is getting closer and closer. So it's not a negative. It's just something that's interesting and funny that I find in multiplayer games, but it also really helps to indicate where the enemy is, who the enemy is, and if your back is turned or you don't see them, or they're sniping from a higher ledge or in the sky, you will have a little orange hue and little orange effects play around you while you're being attacked and taking damage. Another fun aspect are the destructible environments. You'll find yourself breaking almost everything like it's a Lego game or like it's Battlefield 1 or Arkham Knight. I don't know what's happened with modern games over the years, over the past almost decade, but even though games have improved graphically, Other aspects like mechanics and destruction and physics and effects have really been downsized, reduced, or outright removed. When you play something like Arkham Knight, most things are destructible. Throw a batarang at a car, the window breaks, or you leave a dent and eventually it will explode. Do the same thing in Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and it doesn't really happen much, or at all. So that aspect makes it really fun in Marvel Rivals, and it really shows that when developers want to make destructible environments and destructible elements in general to benefit the gameplay, they can, especially when they're not under scrutiny or time constraints by the publisher or any higher-ups as a whole. These destructible environments can also, of course, be used as cover, and you would expect the enemy team to strike these objects a lot, but the gameplay is so engaging and you get so into it that you don't really focus on that a lot. For me, I have a lot of energy. I can get distracted easily, so I just find myself being the only one on my team who's destroying everything that can be broken around me. And I use that to my advantage when there are enemies on a collapsible bridge or a rooftop, a ledge, balcony. It helps. It gets them to fall down, brings them to your level, and you can go in and finish them off with melee or whichever attacks that you're using. Each character has their own unique melee attacks, although when you play as Doctor Strange and Magneto, they basically have the same moveset, but granted, Doctor Strange can actually fly and hover a bit, but just like with Magneto, it takes a bit of practice. The button, which in my case on Xbox is the top left button, for Magneto, that button sends the shard of magnetism and deadly objects towards an enemy, and for Doctor Strange, that propels him into the air where you can hover, descend, or ascend for a few seconds. Magneto uses a sword that he forms out of broken shards, and Doctor Strange uses his sling rings to make basically a whip. Both of them are more so support characters. Both of them have a shield ability. Between the two, I would recommend using Magneto because he is heavier, so he can kind of take more damage, but on the downside, like I mentioned before, it really overlaps with his movement and makes him slower. Doctor Strange is also fairly slow, but he kind of speed walks compared to Magneto's dramatic, slow hovering a few feet off the ground. For other characters like Spider-Man, you would mainly want to play as him for the speed, because the swinging is super, super fun. It really feels like they've achieved what Marvel's Avengers could not achieve with Spider-Man. They've created a completely unique, fun, and intuitive swinging and moveset that can feel similar to Insomniac's games, but also completely different. And when I say similar, I don't mean the animations are the same, like in Marvel's Avengers, but it's just very fluid and fun, and you'll find yourself getting distracted sometimes just swinging around, though it's not as consistent as in actual Spider-Man games. There is kind of a cooldown for swinging, though the areas are so confined that when you swing, you're gonna crash into a lot of the environmental structures. You can climb into corners, and you can also climb walls as Spider-Man. And the funny thing is, the climbing and wall crawling is a lot better than in the Insomniac games. If you notice in the Insomniac games, when you try to crawl over a corner or a sharp ledge, Spider-Man usually won't do it. He kind of just starts to put his hands over the air while his body moves slowly on that ledge, and he just won't go over it. But his crawling here is extremely dynamic. I have yet to try crawling over a ledge that he is unable to get over. Another great character for speed is Captain America. He has this ability where he'll just run and sprint endlessly, and you can run into characters, deal damage, and he tosses his shield and it only bounces off of one character, but while he does that, you can keep sprinting and kind of recover with the shield, then use the blocking ability to display a holographic shield on top of the main one, and it kind of gives you a little bit more protection. But I wouldn't really recommend using Cap as much as heavier characters, again, because he's better for speed and close quarters combat, but you will not get a lot of opportunities to have hand-to-hand combat, or at least do it successfully in this game, because you will have enemies all over you, and it is fairly easy to die very quickly, especially when other players use characters that can teleport and use swords and use really, really quick but also heavy attacks at the same time. So at least for me, I prefer to stay back and move in sometimes, but also project a shield like Magneto's or Doctor Strange's, so everyone behind me can attack and be safe. And several characters have their own support ability that I briefly mentioned before. Some of them can heal you, some of them can put a little orb or shield around you if you're low on health, but they can do that at any moment. I just like to wait until a player is low on health or in a really intense situation. In Magneto's case, it is this bubble shield of magnetism, but you have to time it really well and not waste it. Even though it has a short cooldown, it also lasts for about a second and a half on a player. As for the audio and music, each sound is very unique and distinguishable, and you'll become familiar with all of the respective unique sounds after one or two matches. But the music can get very, very repetitive. It is basically the same one or two tracks over and over. It's nothing special. It's the same kind of generic hero shooter, superhero music that you would expect from this type of game. And I would just recommend turning it off after a while. But of course, music can add layers to any experience, though in this case, I have only really enjoyed it during intense moments or end cutscenes. Now let's get into the narrative. The narrative is fairly bare bones, but it's what you would expect from something like a multiplayer shooter. Just like games like Overwatch, the narrative is creatively incorporated into the gameplay and pushes the events and characters forward. Each landscape takes place in the multiverse, and you will have so many characters having fun, unique interactions, talking about their worlds, other versions of themselves. The voice acting is really fun. Yuri Lowenthal especially is, again, a highlight of Spider-Man. He just returned as Spider-Man in every modern Spider-Man game, and it's always a treat to hear him. And it's really fun to hear characters like Magneto and Doctor Strange kind of put hyperbole on their motivational speeches and discuss their universes and each other's lives, and it just immerses you more into the world and makes it for a more enjoyable experience while you are fighting for your and your team's lives and victory. Although the narrative is nothing really special, and it is another multiverse story, which again really suits the game and what it's going for, I do have another small gripe, which is the map design that stems from the narrative locations. Each area, although unique and diverse stylistically, kind of has a very similar layout. Most of the time, you will be fighting in an area with lots of pillars, lots of rocks, lots of obstacles, and even though they're destructible environments and they help as cover, so because of that, constantly transitioning between the handful of maps and fighting amongst rocks and structures, and then occasionally going inside where it's just ceilings and fully modular environments, it kind of makes it feel a bit tedious over time. but the destructible environments and the gameplay do make up for that enough. I just hope to see more organic locations, more alien locations, and taking more inspiration again from something like Ultimate Alliance 3.
Now that we've gone through the overview of everything, let's go over the best characters in the game. So this is currently in order based on the strength and the power levels, but there will be a bit of bias from myself, of course, because just also based on my experience playing as the characters and facing off against them. So, number 1. I would put Magneto at number 1 because, as you've seen in the footage, he's really reliable. He's a great support character. He can be up close, he can fire from a distance, but in this case, I'm actually going to use Iron Fist because he is stupidly broken right now. And if you look online, anyone else who's playing the game will share the same sentiment and concern about that. So Iron Fist is really fast. He's one of the fastest characters in the game because of his chi powers and because he's just smaller, nimble, more lean. And that's great. And you would expect him to be very strong because he's Iron Fist after all, but he is just crazy strong. He can kill you and your teammates in about 3 to 4 seconds each. So for comparison, I have survived entire matches as Magneto and as other characters facing the Hulk and other strong characters, the Punisher when he's using his turrets, Scarlet Witch, even the Hulk when he's using his power-up. He has this power-up that gives him an extra layer of health and protection, and I can take him down with ease compared to Iron Fist, who just comes up behind you or from the side. I can't even say matches your speed. He excels and exceeds your speed and follows you all around, and his punches are so fast and powerful that he takes you down in about 3 to 4 seconds. And I've seen that happen to my teammates as well. And just because the fact that he's not nerfed yet, logically and just using facts, he is supposed to be at the top of the list right now. But if he was nerfed, it would go to Magneto. Again, there's some personal bias there because I enjoy using him, and he's also my favorite Marvel villain character. Second best. This was a tough choice between Hulk or Venom. I have used both characters. I've recorded only footage of Venom for this review, but I have used both of them. But mostly Venom because Hulk, really in every Marvel game since the original, I cannot remember the name, but Hulk Destruction games, has been really slow. Like, you look at him in Marvel's Avengers, his jumping, his movement, it kind of pulls you back when you jump forward, and it kind of feels the same way here. Granted, Hulk can jump to a crazy tall height in Rivals, which is accurate because he can scale buildings like Superman. He's basically Superman, but a lot bulkier, like the shape and size of Doomsday. And he is strong. It does take far longer to take him down compared to other characters, and that's to be expected. But especially when he uses, I want to call it his roided up ability. Basically like his roided up Bane Venom equivalent ability, where he gets this extra layer of health and protection like I mentioned before, and significantly more difficult to take down. Then after Hulk, Venom. Venom is sometimes just as strong as Hulk in the game, but he is actually kind of great from a distance. You can't use web shooters and shoot web balls like Spider-Man does, but he has these long tendrils that actually have a fair amount of distance. It's kind of hard to tell how far they go because you're always in the action in the moment, and just the perspective and the third-person angle kind of makes it difficult to see where they go and where they stop, because so far I've been able to reach characters close to me, just maybe like 10, 20 feet away from me, maybe a bit farther. So it's just hard to tell, especially because they're also really fast. You shoot and then they come back. You can swing as Venom, which can be just as fun as Spider-Man. I can't tell if I have more control over swinging with Venom or Spider-Man, because Venom kind of has one move set when he swings compared to Spider-Man's little tricks sometimes he does. And Venom is a lot heavier, obviously, when you swing, and he's one tendril at a one tendril, and you can't really switch between that and another tendril as seamlessly as you can with Spider-Man's webs. So you do have more control with Venom, but at the same time, he's so heavy, you kind of push into a building and lean side to side a bit faster than Spidey does. So there's that. Third character, in this case, I can't really decide if I should put Magneto at second or at something like third or fourth. It really varies. It's tough to do a list of this stuff because, again, personal experience with the characters and also just factually which ones are stronger. And it depends on play style, so it's always a personal list. For me, Magneto is number 2, again, because Iron Fist is so stupidly broken and overpowered right now. But Magneto is number 2 because he has great range. He has 2 shields. He can give other shields. You can really move around with him a lot, even though he's kind of slow with his movement. If you jump around and you shoot, and you can use his bubble shield around himself and shoot, you can become really powerful, really reliable, and I recommend using his distant attacks more than his sword attack, because it's really not that powerful. There is an ability on the Xbox, you press Y, and it gives him the ability to kind of give more power to the sword. You get this red highlight, and there's more weight to it, which also, by the way, feels so great in the haptic feedback. The haptics are really fantastic in this game, and even when you're spectating after you die, you get haptic feedback for the other players' movement on your team and whoever you're spectating who killed you. So that's really great attention to detail, and it's just a fun little thing. But yeah, that's my ranking for Magneto. Scarlet Witch. People say that Scarlet Witch is overpowered. She is to a degree, but in the right sense. Personally, I found her to be really weak when I use her. It kind of takes a bit of getting used to her moveset. Like she doesn't really respond every time with when you attack with her. She does these really light chaos ball magic attacks, and she just feels really weak to play as, honestly. I haven't played as her as much, so I haven't leveled up, so that's probably a factor. And I just suck at playing as her, but that's just my opinion on it with my experience. What does make her overpowered in a good way, again, is her chaos explosion ability, which just instantly disintegrates you and anyone else in its vicinity. I've been prey to it many times. It of course sucks when it happens, especially when you're doing well, but it makes sense. So it feels good that she is kind of weaker in her normal attacks, but she has that bigger instant death attack. And the same can be said for Iron Man. He's actually pretty similar to Scarlet Witch, but he, of course, has more height. He can fly higher than her, which both of them can fly a similar height. If anything, she can fly higher than him because he relies on technology. But Iron Man is always hovering around the map. He's shooting his missiles down. They're fine. You can attack him fairly easily, even when he's in the air. But when he does his chest repulsor attack, it can disintegrate you immediately, just like Scarlet Witch's chaos magic. So that's another great character to use, especially for speed, but again, kind of more stiff on the movement side, but not as much as other ground characters, again, like Magneto and Hulk. Moon Knight is fun to use. He's basically kind of like Batman and multiverses. You can jump, and then he does this little cape glide. I'd actually compare him to the Dark Knight Rises game because the way you jump and glide, it's kind of stiff. You don't have a lot of control over it. So wherever you're facing is where you're going. You can't really control up and down or turn all that much. But he's really fun to use for that, though he is really weak. He throws his little moon shurikens, and that's really about it. I wouldn't recommend using him either for distant attacks or melee attacks. Again, personal experience. Tried him out. Felt like Batman a bit, but it just lacks the weight of when you throw the little moon shuriken things. And yeah. Wolverine is really fun to use. He's one of the bulkier characters, even though he's smaller, both artistically and with his stats. He is just as strong and just as fast as Iron Fist. He has a really consistent claw attack, and when he's up close and when he chases you, you're basically screwed. He has a lot of health. He doesn't regenerate health, but he has a lot of health, and he's really strong, especially up close. He does this lunge attack. If you remember the X-Men Origins game where you can lunge crazy distances towards an enemy, he can do that. So that is so far my list of the best characters to use. The rest of the characters, it really depends on the height and the speed. Like Jeff the Land Shark, who is obviously really cute, really fun. He can, like I mentioned before, eat you up and swim with you in the ground and throw you off a ledge. I don't know if this is supposed to happen, but I have just pressed random buttons when I'm caught in his jaws, and that has sometimes gotten me out. So there is, I think, a limit for when he can throw you out, but at the same time, I've seen players using him swim for quite a long period of time. So again, it's just difficult to tell with all these things. There's Rocket Raccoon. I haven't really seen anything significant of him. He's small, he's nimble, he can kind of run around you, jump kind of high. That's really about it. He hasn't done a lot of damage for me. There's Squirrel Girl. Really nothing to say. She throws big nuts at you. Squirrel Girl's just kind of been a joke ever since she was created, and she is the same in the game. So yeah, there's that as well. Other than that, those are just some of the best and kind of some of the worst characters on the list. Again, there are a lot of characters to go through. Another, actually, I just forgot to mention is Punisher. Punisher is definitely the best gun-wielding character in the game. He can use a turret, but if you're using someone like Magneto or Doctor Strange, you can easily deflect the bullets and just go up close to him. Even if you're not using the shield to block the bullets, you can just go up to the turret, kind of jump around, and he'll have to follow you. So the turret is kind of slow when it turns, and you can just destroy it easily or hit him from the back. But his guns are the strongest part of his loadout. Of course, that's his entire loadout, but that's just the strongest loadout in the game in terms of gun-based characters. So I would use Punisher from a distance, and you don't have to worry as much about speed either, because he's just kind of heavier and stronger while being shorter than other characters. So he's just great to use, and that is my list for the best and some of the worst characters so far. Now, for some of the best maps, there's honestly not a lot to say. What I mentioned about the maps before is everything you need to know, and everything you see in this video from the maps is all that it really is in the game so far. A lot of the rocky, more rural landscapes are really similar, so there's nothing really special to say. The landscapes and art direction are gorgeous. The lava, the entities, the big heads. There's a planet or location where Null has taken over, so there's some symbiote clusters around. You saw that earlier in this review. Uh, there's a big skull in the middle of the map. There's nothing really to see or to find. It's just empty skull. There's a Tokyo map, which is really, really beautiful. I love the atmosphere, the music. The art direction especially shines in that. And it's really fun to swing as Spider-Man on that location. And the other best map, again from personal experience, is Wakanda. Wakanda is my favorite location in Marvel, and it's one of my favorite fictional locations in general. And it's really, really gorgeous, just like Tokyo. The style really suits it in the game. The atmosphere, there's some cultural music playing, and it just really transports you there. And I love the vibe of the Black Panther movie and the comics overall. So after having the mostly jungle-based landscape in Marvel's Avengers Wakanda, it was really refreshing to get sort of a more astral plane, more ancestral plane type of experience here with the purple hues. And the intergalactic Wakandan Empire is just such an awesome concept, and I really hope to see more of it. Just having Wakanda be conquerors of the galaxy, or just kind of governing more of the world in the galaxy than just Africa, is a really, really cool idea. The style, the vibe, the atmosphere all works really well, and that is really all I have to say about the maps so far. The rest that I had to say about the maps is earlier in the review, so that's about it.
Another little nitpick with the environments that I want to mention is sometimes the style can conflict with Unreal Engine. When you look at something, especially like reflections and lighting, you can tell it's Unreal Engine. Just like in EA's games, you can tell something is the Frostbite engine. And although the Frostbite engine handles things fairly similarly to Unreal graphically, Unreal has always been more stylized realism in a way. So there are some locations, especially interiors, where you will have these hand-painted, illustrated, architectural pillars and blocks and props, which of course blends well with the style. But then you'll have these really almost realistic reflective floors, and it kind of breaks the immersion a bit in the sense of stylistic conflict, because they just don't blend well, and a different shader could definitely be used for those surfaces, especially floors, to kind of give it a more sketched, painted, cartoony style mixed with the screen space reflections and lumen that is being used. One of my favorite aspects about the game narratively is the 2D animated cutscenes that briefly play when you complete a match, when you start a match, and when you are selecting a character. I am a huge sucker for 2D, 3D, and anime mixtures. If you look at something like the TMNT Cowabunga collection, the game starts off with this really polished, clean, awesome animation where it just introduces the turtles, and it's this nice blend of 2D and 3D high octane action. It might have been the Cowabunga collection, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was one of the newer TMNT games or collection re-releases. So that type of style is always super intuitive and appealing, at least to myself, and it really has always suited Marvel's style, and I hope they continue to pursue that here. Aside from the stylistic comparisons to games like Fortnite, another game that recently re-released that is very similar to this is Multiverses. Obviously, for one, they both have comic book characters, comic book styles, and deal with the multiverse. And the way that the season and battle pass structure is set up in Marvel Rivals is similar to Multiverses, but in a far less grindy manner. Multiverses was fun from the beginning, but they honestly downgraded and downscaled a lot of the content and visuals even after they re-released it, and they implemented a very grindy multiverse phase-based narrative gameplay structure. And Rivals, like I mentioned, does incorporate that, but not in a grindy way at all. This is a very, very perfect balance of casual and competitive gameplay. And another aspect that contributes to that is the fact that there is a tournament mode. The tournament mode has launched with the game, and at that time you can sign up within 48 hours, and then last night it was 30 hours. So I haven't checked at the time of recording this review, but at this time the tournament signups should already be open or close to opening in a few hours or so. But to sign up, you have to be in a specific rank called Rank 3 Silver. And to do that, you have to continue playing the game until you reach level 10, which is separate from the ranks. So in the main menu at the top right, you'll see a little gray icon, which shows your personal level and rank. For myself, for example, I am on rank 8 or 9 at the time of recording this. And to be able to rank up to Silver 3, you have to play in the competitive mode. But the competitive mode is locked until you reach personal level 10. But the good thing about that is it's not a grind. You level up super quickly, also like Star Wars Hunters, and once you click the tournament sign up, you'll be presented with an option to apply for various factions. These are factions created by players using the logos provided in games. They can provide their own descriptions, player titles, ranks, whatever they want with the information either provided or that they choose to add. Or you can create your own faction, which I ended up doing, but you cannot participate in the tournament without 6 players per faction. And to play at a tournament, you do not only need to meet the prerequisite rank of Silver 3, but you also need to join a faction, and you need to be playing on the same console and make sure that the faction application status is not full. So at this point, you'd be better off finding friends or family to join your ranks and enroll in the tournament together and get them to grind through the gameplay to reach the required level to join. And on top of that, to join a faction, you need to be playing on the same device that the players in the group are. So when you click a faction or any of those groups, you will see little icons indicating the device that the players are playing on. If it's a console, they're playing on console. If it's a PC icon, they're playing on PC. And you need to be mindful of that. Or else your application will just not go through at all. And the game does not tell you that. So newcomers, beware of writing a 200-word or less description when you apply to the application, which it gives you the option to do when you click apply, because that could be for nothing if you do not check which console, or which device rather, that the faction players are using, and if you don't meet the rank requirement to play in the tournament, even though some of the factions do not require you to be at a certain rank to join them, you still need to reach Silver 3 to play in the contest itself. And some of the groups might already be full, so you might not be able to send an application either way. So that's really it for Marvel Rivals at the moment. I'm really interested to see if they can maintain this consumer-friendly structure and player model, and I really recommend anyone to try this, whether they're playing alone or with friends. Try out all of the characters, see what you're best at, see what you're most comfortable with, and let's all just look forward to seeing more updates from the game. After the disasters that were Overwatch 2, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and recently Concord, It's really refreshing to see multiplayer and live service games kind of going back on track. When I was growing up, Warframe was one of the multiplayer shooters that I would always give praise to for being so expansive and being on multiple platforms and being really consumer friendly. And one game that I would always give praise to while growing up was Warframe for its consumer friendly practices, expansive maps across all platforms, engaging fast gameplay, and I'm happy to say that I am seeing that same structure already in Marvel Rivals. Aside from the speed of the characters, the third person perspective, the unique environments, the fun gameplay, and just seeing that this could be a really thriving, flourishing game ecosystem and economy makes me really happy, and it's making a lot of other players happy. And just having this be the perfect blend of Warframe, Overwatch 1, Paladins, Fortnite, and Ultimate Alliance 3. All the Ultimate Alliance games, but specifically Ultimate Alliance 3, since it really relates closest to that. It's really great to see that, and they have been respecting the characters. And just like in both the Lego Skywalker Saga and EA's Battlefront 2, you have characters exchanging dialogue from continuities that you know both from, and continuities and universes that you know they're both definitely not part of. So it really keeps you engaged and makes you smile, and it continues to make it a relaxing experience even though it's a competitive shooter. Overwatch and Paladins were arguably the catalysts for the modern day gaming industry, where we see so many various vibrant, colorful, hero-based multiplayer shooters both in first and third person, and for the live service formula as a whole, which has become so oversaturated over the years that it's caused the downfall of both the game's player bases and the genre as years keep going by. 1 year later, in 2017, we also got two new shooters that reinvented the genres in their respective areas, and those were PUBG and Fortnite. They completely changed the landscape for how battle royales are played and the style of battle royales, which now also mostly take on the cartoony style of Overwatch and Paladins. But battle royales were around prior to PUBG and Fortnite. Granted, they were in their infancy and they were more like community-oriented mods on top of other group-based multiplayer shooters, but PUBG and Fortnite completely turned all of those games into a fresh direction, and that is why both games are still alive and well, especially Fortnite. I don't need to go into Fortnite's popularity. Everyone here knows it, everyone has seen it, your friends, your parents, your non-gamer grandma, her dog, everyone knows about Fortnite. But Fortnite has also kind of started to lose its own identity. Granted, it's still a fantastic game, and it's especially praised for having one of, if not the best, monetization models where there are no predatory or deceitful practices. You know exactly what you're paying for. You can pay for a very generous monthly crew membership fee and get so many skins from your favorite characters, franchises, and licenses due to Epic Games' ongoing partnerships. But before Fortnite, PUBG was practically the only new battle royale that people could get into. It had fluid mechanics, it had realistic graphics, and Fortnite kind of came in and pulled the rug out from under it. PUBG has been making somewhat of a comeback lately, but now neither that or any other battle royale game can live up to the popularity and grandiose scale of Fortnite, not just from original content, but also licensed content as well. And when I say that Fortnite has also somewhat lost its identity, that is not speaking in a very negative light. They do bring back the original map, which many players love and have nostalgia for, especially from 2018. But it's also kind of lost its graphical touch, per se. It's still cartoony, but it's not that heavily cartoony, stylized game that everyone fell in love with. Similar to Star Wars The Clone Wars, it used to have these really unique painted, kind of gritty textures, and now come Season 7 and Bad Batch, you still have those textures, but they've been really smoothed out, really refined and polished when nobody really asked for that. But at the same time, it doesn't exactly hurt the content. But the point I'm trying to make is all of these shooters and live service games over the years and their oversaturation of the market have really caused gaming as a whole to lose its identity. Many developers, not at the fault of the developers themselves, but the publishers and the higher ups, they've been forced to release games now, finish them later. This trend has destroyed a lot of ongoing franchises, some like Battlefront 1 and 2 made by EA. You had the original classic Battlefront 1 and 2, and they came out with all of the content that they were initially intended to have. And of course, at that time, there were no loot boxes or as many microtransactions or DLC as there is today, especially not in the same monetization first, consumer satisfaction second sort of way. But once EA took on the licenses of Battlefront, those games also started to lose their identity. Content was being cut, eras were being left out. But don't get me wrong, I love Battlefront 1 and 2, both the originals and EA's. I play EA Battlefront 2 almost daily, and I owe it for a lot of nostalgia and for making me a lot of connections at EA, and also just revitalizing my interest in multiplayer games. I have never been a massive fan of multiplayer games in general. When I was a kid, I played Halo. Everyone played Halo. There were other occasional multiplayer games I would play, but I would never play them by myself. But games like Star Wars The Old Republic Online and EA's Battlefront 1 and 2, and revisiting the multiplayer of the original Battlefront games completely revived my interest in multiplayer games that I never thought I would have. And lately, I've been craving a lot of new experiences, which is why I continue to return to those games, download mods for single player games that don't have multiplayer support currently supported or never did in general. And it's the reason why I got onto Marvel Rivals immediately. Marvel Rivals is a really refreshing take on, again, a very oversaturated and dying market, and it comes off on the heels of, let's say, newfound but also revitalized love for multiplayer games, combined with my love for comic books and those characters and Marvel in general, is what got me following games like Marvel Rivals, Star Wars Hunters, and got me back into Star Wars The Old Republic Online. So to close out my final thoughts, I really, again, recommend that anyone go play Marvel Rivals right now, especially because it's free. And let's hope that this, with Marvel Spider-Man 3 and Marvel's Wolverine from Insomniac, are all a huge revival of the Marvel Universe in games and superhero games, and also, in this case, multiplayer shooters as a whole. It's really great to see things getting back on track after a really somewhat dark few years of gaming where there have just been flops, cancellations, layoffs, studio closures, and publishers, more than developers, and sometimes not developers' faults at all, for not listening to what players want. So that's it for this review. There isn't really too much to say about this game yet. It's really a strong start, both for the genre and the IP, and I will keep a close eye on the developments and cover new content as it appears. And if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and supporting me on Patreon. Even $1 a month from everyone would really help. And I've laid out separate tiers and perks that lay out ways you can get involved with the channel, and I can help you with your content. You can also follow me on social media on Instagram at MikeGMakesStuff to get all of the updates for videos and content and artwork. I just like to have a lot of fun there with cosplaying, drawing, talking to people, taking requests, and just posting about the channel now. And I'm really happy that I was able to get this first review out on the channel. I'm looking forward to interacting with everyone, hearing everyone's thoughts. I will keep track of the game and have all the updates posted to the channel as they arrive. And look forward to the next review, which will be Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, and everything else you can hear from the perspective of me, both a player and game developer. Thank you all for watching and listening. Keep an eye out for potential live streams as well. That has been in my plan, but I will mostly be making reviews. Though if you like to watch streams and watch me suffer with platinum streams, then head over to my Twitch at Grinerd18. So that's Gri big Nerd 18, and keep an eye out on this channel for live streams as well. Thank you, and have a great day or a great night wherever you guys are.